If you've been thinking about starting a nonprofit, you probably know that you should create a nonprofit business plan, but you probably have a lot of questions, especially writing a business plan that makes sense today, because examples you might find online are feeling a little outdated, overly formal, or maybe a little disconnected from the reality that many organizations are facing right now. Let's be honest, nonprofit business planning in 2026 just is not the same as it was even 5 or 10 years ago. The environment has changed. Funding is less predictable, community needs are shifting faster, technology is reshaping how organizations completely operate. Nonprofit business plans today need to address today's reality, not yesterday's expectations. So by the end of this video, you're going to understand what a nonprofit business plan actually needs to include in 2026 and how to build one that feels relevant, realistic, and genuinely useful for you and the people deciding whether to fund and support your work this year. Okay, let's start with a question you might be asking yourself. Do you really need a nonprofit business plan anymore in today's modern age? Well, the answer is yes, but probably not for the reasons you've been told before. So in the past, a nonprofit business plan was about describing your vision for the future and showing how you've planned out all the ways that you're going to reach that vision. But in 2026, it's about showing something a little different. It's showing that you understand the current environment that you're operating in and that you've thought through how your organization will make decisions when things change, because they will. That matters even more now than it did years ago, because volatility isn't occasional anymore, it's constant. Nonprofit leaders today are navigating funding uncertainty, staffing challenges, and rising community needs all at the same time. So a strong business plan helps founders get clarity on what to prioritize. It can serve as a pitch deck to funders that helps them trust how you think and how you'll lead. And it also helps your board understand their responsibilities and any risks to the organization. And it helps potential partners understand if they are really truly aligned to your work. If business plans have felt like checking pointless boxes in the past, it's usually because they weren't designed for real life decision making. And in a moment, I'll share exactly what to include in a nonprofit business plan that helps you navigate today's environment and inspire supporters. But first, I want to talk through a few key environmental factors that nonprofit business plans need to account for in 2026 that are different in years past, because context is really critical here. First, there's external volatility, like I mentioned. Funding and funding cycles are just less predictable. Government partnerships that organizations counted on for decades are less stable in many places. Community needs are shifting faster. So a long plan that assumes steady growth with no disruption actually hurts credibility now instead of helping it. Second, there's technology and AI stuff. Even if you don't plan to use AI tools directly, funders and boards expect you to have thought about how technology affects your operations, your data, your communication, and your efficiency. Avoiding the topic entirely can read as a blind spot. Third, there's marketing and outreach fatigue. We just live in a world that exists digitally, but that is also burning people out in many ways just for being online all the time. Business plans that assume unlimited attention on social media or constant email growth without a thoughtful strategy tend to fall flat. And finally, there's revenue realism. Funding is stretched for many organizations right now, so nonprofits are being encouraged to thoughtfully diversify their revenue, not to replace fundraising, but to reduce that fragility. So a modern business plan isn't about locking in assumptions, it's about showing how you'll adapt when assumptions break. Once you understand that, the structure of the plan itself becomes a lot clearer. So let's get into that now. Let's dive into the 7 must-have parts of your nonprofit business plan. Let's go through each section step by step. And for each, I'm going to explain what you should include in that section and some tips for how to make it compelling. The first section answers 3 simple but really important questions. What problem are you trying to solve? Who is affected by the problem? And why does this problem matter right now? Along with your mission, you're going to want to include a clear description of the problem your organization aims to address, and especially the community context around it. So that might include brief anecdotes or stories of lived experience from the people affected by the problem directly, local data on the issue, or other credible research that helps explain why this issue exists and who is most affected. For example, a nonprofit tackling food insecurity might write something like, in our county, 1 in 5 households experience food insecurity, with disproportionately high rates among families with young children and older adults. Existing food assistance programs are oversubscribed, and many neighborhoods lack consistent access to fresh food. Specificity like this helps potential supporters trust that you're responding to a real defined need and not just a vague concern. The next section of a nonprofit business plan often confuses people, and it's your theory of change. So if you're not familiar, your theory of change is a description of how you believe the change you want to see in your community will actually happen. What are the levers you can push through your organization's work that will result in moving the needle on that issue? In plain language, it's about cause and effect. It connects the problem that you named in the previous section to the actions that you plan to take, and then the outcomes that you expect to see over time as a result. To write this section, you're going to want to research what's been shown to work to meaningfully make a difference for the issue that you're tackling. Look at recent studies, evaluations of other programs in other cities, or insights from similar organizations. Using our food insecurity example, the start of your theory of change statement might sound something like, research of similar models shows that providing consistent access to fresh groceries paired with nutrition education and benefits enrollment support will lead to improved food stability and long-term health outcomes for participating families. Funders aren't looking for certainty here. They know you don't know the future, but they're listening for whether your logic holds together. Now, this third section is where you describe what you actually do, your programs and activities, and how each program leads to the outcomes that you just described in your theory of change. You're going to want to explain who participates in the programs, what services they receive, how often, and through which partnerships. One quick tip here is to speak as plainly as possible, avoiding any jargon. Anybody should be able to understand how your programs work in like 30 seconds. For example, our core program will provide weekly grocery distributions at 3 community sites, along with optional cooking demonstrations and one-on-one assistance enrolling in SNAP and WIC benefits. The key here is alignment. Everything you describe should clearly connect back to that theory of change in the previous section. This fourth section explains how the organization will actually function day to day. So its operations, its staffing, its governance, its systems, its infrastructure, etc. It covers what infrastructure will be necessary to actually run the programs that you described and achieve your mission. So who is responsible for running each aspect of the organization, from management and administration to marketing, fundraising, and overseeing your programs? If you don't have specific people in mind for each role just yet, just include job titles and include a description of their responsibilities here. But there's something else really important that you don't want to skip here. In 2026, this section must have at least a basic technology plan. You don't need cutting-edge tools at this stage, but you do need to show that you've thought through how technology supports coordination, data tracking, and communication. Using our food insecurity nonprofit example again, that might sound something like the following. We'll use a secure cloud-based client tracking system to monitor household participation and food distribution volumes, allowing us to adjust inventory and report outcomes accurately to funders. This reassures supporters that you can manage growth responsibly and that you're thinking about that infrastructure that will actually be required to achieve the goals that you've described. Now, in this fifth section, marketing and outreach, you'll explain your plan for how people will find your organization, how they will understand your work, and how they're going to stay connected to you. So Real quick, here's a huge mistake that I see new and growing organizations make. It's assuming that if they just launch a website and some programs, that people will automatically find them. In reality, being discoverable takes some strategy and effort getting and staying visible in your community, especially in a world of very limited attention spans. So when you're doing your research for this section, focus on who your target audiences are and where those audiences actually spend time. You'll want to closely examine strategies for how to build trust in a digitally saturated world because people don't support organizations that they don't trust. For example, our outreach strategy prioritizes partnerships with schools and healthcare providers, supported by targeted email communication and limited social media focused on program updates rather than constant promotion. That shows an intentional marketing strategy, not just noise. Okay, so this next section explains something super important that I'm sure you're wondering about, which is how your organization is going to be financially sustained, and also why you've chosen your particular funding model or targeted revenue sources. So in past videos, I've talked about the misconception that all nonprofits equally can rely on grants, donations, or any particular revenue source. But the reality is every nonprofit's funding model is different. Some organizations' missions are best suited to grants, some are a better fit for corporate partnerships, and others might find program fees or earned income make the most sense. It's not about trying to get funding from all of the possible sources, it's about finding the top 2 to 3 that best fit your mission and approach. So when you're doing your research for this section, take a look at typical funding models for similar organizations in other cities, donor behavior trends, and also your own team's skills in different types of fundraising. A food insecurity nonprofit might write something like, our funding model prioritizes individual donations supplemented by corporate sponsorships and earned revenue through paid cooking classes for those who can afford it to reduce reliance on any single revenue source. And in a moment, we're going to talk about the final critical section of your nonprofit business plan, the section that outlines how your strategy will hold up when funding shifts or assumptions change. But first, I want to take a moment to thank the sponsor of this video. Click and Pledge makes it easy for new and growing nonprofits to start strong and scale with confidence. With Click and Pledge, you're going to get professional grade tools for a super affordable startup level cost from day one. They've got customizable donation forms that you can plug right into your website. And these forms are often the foundation of any really strong online fundraising strategy. But Click and Pledge also has a number of other tools included in their affordable flat monthly costs that you can use as your nonprofit grows. In-person and peer-to-peer fundraising features. They've got video fundraising with embedded donation links right in the video, text to give tools, donor management, Salesforce, and other integrations, all included with no contracts or surprise add-on fees. Unlike some platforms that increase your fees as you grow, Click and Pledge pricing stays the same, whether you have 10 donors or 10,000 donors. So use the QR code and link in the description to check out Click and Pledge, book a demo, and get your first $25 monthly fee waived. Okay, this is the final section of your business plan, and it is really critical for 2026 and beyond because it's where you show how your plan actually works in the ever-evolving real world. In this section, you're going to map out potential risks or changes to your situation, especially external or environmental factors that could change unexpectedly. It could be things like funding delays or loss of a funding source, staff turnover or loss of specific roles, sudden increased community demand, etc. And for each of these potential risks or changes, you're going to include a brief statement describing how you would plan to respond. For example, our food insecurity nonprofit example might write, if grant funding is delayed, we will temporarily change our distribution frequency to prioritize high-need households and increase outreach to individual donors to fill the gap. This is where your strategy, especially your funding strategy, becomes operational. And it shows funders and boards that you won't freeze up when conditions shift. You know how to adapt. That resilience and agility is what inspires people to invest. So if writing a nonprofit business plan has at all felt intimidating, I really hope that this offers at least a little bit of clarity and helps you out. And remember that what actually makes a nonprofit business plan work isn't how detailed or perfect it is. It's whether it shows your discernment, how you understand uncertainty, that you've made intentional choices, and that you know that you're still learning. If you want a practical next step, try outlining these 7 sections without worrying about perfect language yet, and let the gaps sort of show you where you need more research or conversation with others. And if you want more support or guidance, I share weekly tips and resources for nonprofit leaders and changemakers in my free weekly newsletter and on my website, changemakercafe.com, and that's linked below. In the next video, I'll talk through how to create one of the most underrated yet most important documents that you need to start and grow a nonprofit that succeeds: your value statement. Subscribe so you don't miss that. And I'm Amber Melanie Smith, and I'll see you next week. Bye.